Hi, I'm Jeff Miller.
And I'm Anthony Navarro, and welcome to Talk Out Loud, where LGBTQIA plus people proudly share their stories. We're excited to launch Proud Out Loud, which is a limited Pride Month series brought to you by the team at Talk Out Loud in partnership with Tybar. On this episode of Talk Out Loud, we're here with River Gallo. River is a GLAAD award-winning Salvadoran-American filmmaker, actor, writer, model, and intersex activist. Growing up in New Jersey, River experienced the concept of hiding your true self at times for survival purposes, particularly as a child of immigrants living in a predominantly white area. They also had to hide their non-consensual operation as an intersex teen. Beginning to find themselves in the arts, River's dream led them to NYU and eventually to USC. This is where their thesis would become the first ever intersex short film, Ponyboi. And they discovered that they were not alone. Today, River is working to create representation and understanding of intersex people through film, television, and theater. Let's hear River's story.
Hey, River, how's it going today?
Great. How are you?
I'm really well. It's great to be here with you and to get to know you a little bit better. Anthony and I have really enjoyed watching you and the things that you've been creating in the world. But that being said, we kind of wanted to start back a little bit back in time and kind of get to know you a little bit better, like growing up in history and just to better understand what makes you who you are today. So we're in LA, but you just got back from the East Coast, right?
Yes. So I just got back from 3 months in New Jersey. That's where I'm from. I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I'm very proud to be from there. I was born in a small town just outside of New York City. My parents are from El Salvador, and they immigrated undocumented to the U.S. in 1980, and moved to New York first, and then saved enough money to then move out to the suburbs in New Jersey. And so I grew up in a very, just kind of very Jersey town, like very Italian. And for a long time, I felt even encouraged by my parents actually to assimilate and to not necessarily show our heritage in front of people. And it was something that was reserved for our house and with our family. And yeah, that definitely affected my psychology for sure, of hiding the idea or concept of hiding your true self was something that from a young age was encouraged by my parents for survival purposes, because throughout my childhood, I definitely witnessed racism, specifically towards my dad, who is, brown skinned, has that very Central American kind of look where, people would think he was our landscaper and not the owner of our house, or police sometimes would be where are you going? When he was entering his own house. Yeah, heavy. But I feel like I had a very, my childhood was very, I did karate. I did pretty typical kind of. But at the same time, when I was 12, I found out that my parents told me for the first time that I was born with a condition where my testicles were absent at birth. And I was put on testosterone and in order to go through puberty. And very soon after, my parents also brought me to different specialists and mystics and kind of seeking all avenues to help, I guess what the theory was, that my testicles would eventually descend, but they just were never present. But they just kind of had this hope for a very long time. But all this kind of constantly showing my genitals to other people, to, doctors or specialists or other people, led to eventually an incident of sexual abuse. And yeah, just kind of, can I curse?
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess I just kind of like, just kind of chucked it out to, these are the cards that I was handed to. But throughout all of this, the word intersex was never mentioned. And I just thought I was just had this weird medical thing. And then it wasn't until when I was 16, I had a unconsented surgery to have prosthetic testicles implanted into me, because the idea was they wanted, me to look completely cisgendered. And, if I had a penis, then it would make sense to also have testicles. And so I did that in secret in high school. And I remember leaving for like 2 weeks from class and then coming back and like being on crutches and saying that like I had some kind of like that I pulled my groin on the treadmill accident.
My gosh.
And at the time I thought it was funny, but thinking about it now, it's just kind of like, oh, that's so sad that like I went through all that and then like couldn't even be honest about like I'm having a major surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was in high school discovering theater that really like kind of changed the course of my life. I started doing musicals both in high school and then outside of high school in regional theater. And as many young queer kids who maybe don't know they're queer yet find each other doing theater.
Right.
And that led me to find my love for acting and performing, and what led me to then go to want to apply for acting school. And so I did. I applied. And got into NYU, to the Tisch School of the Arts, which was like, I remember being so tunnel focused. I was like, this is where I'm going. And like, especially living where I did in New Jersey, I remember there were places in my town where you could like see the New York City skyline.
Yeah.
And it always felt to me like when I was a kid in high school, like New York was the place where like I could be accepted and that where I'd find myself. And so like there was just, it wasn't just of like my career or my life was riding on me getting into NYU and to acting. It was just like everything, like my acceptance, I just knew I had to go there. And
So just out of curiosity, because I've known like people where it's been so close, but yet so far away. Were you like at 16? Were you doing like weekend like little getaways over there, or were you putting your feet in the water in New York at all?
Yeah, when I was like 16, or my parents would let me go into the city by myself, like with my friends. And then when I was 18, sometimes I would go by myself too, or like go to a concert, or so I was definitely
What did that feel like for you when you would get there?
Well, thinking about it now, I'm like, wow, that's really bold of my parents to just be like, go to New York City. Yeah. But it was also just a testament to like just how throughout the college application process, throughout all my schooling, my parents were, they didn't speak English. So like they taught us, we had to put the effort to do anything ourselves. And at the time, it was also kind of annoying because I knew like other parents, their parents or other kids, like their parents would help them do things. And like, but I think it really taught me like just to be a go-getter and to just like, you have to fucking hustle. And so, I mean, it's funny just being a 16-year-old in New York. But wow, I haven't thought about that in a long time, actually. Just like hanging out at Port Authority. But I always loved going into New York. And then living there, and going to school there was its own trip.
So you get accepted into NYU?
Yes. So eventually I got in, and then I got in not for musical theater, which is what I wanted to go for, but I got in for experimental theater, which in hindsight was like one of the best things that ever happened to me, because the program was a lot about like finding your own voice, like as opposed to kind of fitting yourself into, you know, the larger canon of musical theater. It was about like figuring out what you wanted to write and like devising your own theater pieces. And I think that's what led me to then screenwriting, and then which led me to screen acting, was the idea of like, you know, writing the story for yourself, or the story that I never saw for myself. But you know, being in New York was just like, thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't know if I would let my children like live in New York City at 18 years old unsupervised. Like,
sure.
I mean, there was just a lot of drugs and like a lot of partying.
I'm curious. I know, like, for myself, so I grew up in Chicago, lived in the suburbs, and same sort of experience, like 15, 16, started going into the city not by myself, but with like my friends, and going into like those like queer community, you know, pockets, those neighborhoods. And I know for me that part of that experience, and now that as like we're talking about this, I'm thinking about like, I don't even know why my parents would let us like go into the city, and like not only that, but we would drive. So it's just like thinking about that, it was like, why would they? But whatever, I'm glad they did. I know though, for me, being in some of those neighborhoods and around like other queer people, at the time the neighborhood was called Boys Town. Now it's called North Halsted to be more inclusive. But I know for myself, it was, and I guess also being part of like the theater program and, you know, in high school and whatnot, I really started to understand and feel like, get a better understanding of who I am and like my queerness by being there. Do you think that going to the city, like that really did, like some of that exposure start to get you to feel more comfortable with yourself as a queer person?
I think so. I think going into the city definitely helped me feel more comfortable. I mean, at the time, I had a boyfriend in high school in secret for like 2 years, and then also had a girlfriend my end of my senior year, or at senior year. So yeah, I guess going into New York helped me feel like, you know, there was so many more different shades of being. Like there was like, you know, I didn't have to be one thing, but I think it was also a kind of, if I didn't conceptualize it when I was there, like reflecting back on it now as we're talking, like, yeah, it definitely, I think, infiltrated my psyche for sure.
So, River, you mentioned earlier about, I think you used the word narrative, which is a word that I really kind of feel something like, when someone uses that word, I feel it like in my chest. Like there's something like a soul level when we talk about the narrative, and especially about being able to tell your own narrative, not somebody else telling your narrative. Was there anything like at NYU at Tisch that, like, if someone's listening today who really wants to get into storytelling, directing, writing, producing, that really has stuck with you and part of your process that came out of that experience?
Yeah, it's like something that's kind of really hard to juggle, and I'm still juggling it with it as well. But it's like the balance of listening to people and also not listening to people. Because it's like, and I think about this a lot. Then when I went to film school here in LA at USC, like professors are there to guide you. Your parents are there to guide you, friends, people that inspire you, to help you go into like a certain direction. But the actual motor of what keeps you going, or your navigation system, has to come from a very deep internal place that requires deep listening to a system that only you can listen to. And I realized that the process of being an artist is like, or just really a human, is about working towards finally hearing and attuning to that inner voice or that inner guidance system, or, you know, one can call it God, one can call it spirit, like whatever that is for you, like, but that's a personal thing, that only a relationship that only you can develop, and it has to do with yourself and something larger or deeper than yourself. And for me, I just realized that sometimes people thought I was crazy for doing certain things, or things like, you know, weren't going to happen, or they were too much, they were too big, I was too different, I was too, you know. But I knew something in me said, no, you have to keep going for this. You have to, you know. And at the same time, sometimes I had really bad ideas. And like, you know, I was like, God, at 18, I was actually arrested in New York for smoking weed outside of Radio City Music Hall. And that was like, in hindsight, the stupidest thing one could ever do. But I was, you know, definitely, you know, if I thought about what my mom would say about that, like, it's like, no, like, don't do that. I'm just any rational person. So like, yeah, I would say that's like the biggest lesson that I've learned, is just like how to find that counterbalance between listening to the system, your community of people that you trust, and also sometimes saying, fuck that, I have to listen to, you know, myself.
Well, there's something where, so in listening to people who are guiding you, it's like when you listen to I don't want to say the right people, but people who are in tune and understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. I feel like there's a difference in listening to those people versus like listening to someone who thinks that they know what's right for you, with really not taking into account what it is that you're feeling and, you know, trying to work towards. I know, like, for myself, there's just been times where, like, I've done things where same kind of thing, like, people thought I was crazy for doing, you know, things that I was doing. And it was like, I just knew deep inside that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I stayed the course. And maybe I like made mistakes along the way, but part of like that journey and that process is when you make those mistakes, you learn. You can't just learn from people telling you, you know? So it's like, I don't know, like, I didn't get arrested for smoking weed, but, you know, I've done like some silly things in my life. And like looking back, like there's some times where I'm like, how am I still alive? Like, how did I make it home that night? But it just, part of that though is part of the experience to make, you know, each one of us who we are today, to be able to keep going on that path that we're following or that we're being guided, you know, to do, which I guess, you know, the way that I look at it, it's like, I'm just following my destiny. You know, I'm here, I'm only here for a short amount of time, and I'm supposed to be doing a certain thing. And when that voice tells me it's time to do something, I follow it. And whether or not I have support of everyone in my life, I think, you know, just not everybody's on the same wavelength, and not everyone is in tune with what that, you know, that is inside them. So it's just being careful on who you listen to. It's a good reminder.
Yeah, you said earlier, you know, God, spirit, and I think about like a boat, right? Like it's got a, you know, a motor that's below the surface, and sometimes like the water can be smooth as glass, and then down below that there's this propulsion system that's really working hard.
I like that,
right? And so like I really identified with, like we talked about, like, and for me sometimes a source can also be a word that can fit that plank, because sometimes I have like these preconceived ideas about God from childhood that don't quite make space for what I'm feeling. And I think that, you know, I like how you talked about how as an artist, but also just as a human, like we're all living, breathing things that have the ability to tap into that. And I think sometimes that when I start to realize that like the world's like not there can be this thought I've had both thought processes where like it's just I'm just living in this world and it is what it is, versus that the world is all growing and evolving, and I get to be part of that. So I have to keep, you know, there's that reflection within myself to be like, what is the world asking me to contribute, to transpire? Because sometimes when other people aren't hearing the same thing, getting the same message I'm getting, it doesn't make sense. But those can't be my sounding blocks either, because then that source is not manifesting it in my life in a way that, you know, we're going to talk more about what you've created. And obviously this source whatever you choose to call it, has been manifesting in really, really wonderful, beautiful ways in your life, right? So I think then that kind of brings us like to USC. You come out here to LA to go to USC, and you got your master's, right?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, during your master's, you had a thesis that you worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I came out to LA after going through some pretty serious health stuff after graduating NYU, and just kind of feeling like not knowing if I would ever be able to act again. And that kind of, in addition to before that, my health crisis, just a lot of agents and managers not knowing really how to typecast me or like how to place me. So it was like a combination of like, okay, well, I guess I need to learn how to write and direct and be a filmmaker because the parts aren't there for me. And then the combination of this health crisis was like, okay, well, maybe I will never be able to act again. So I have to focus on being behind the camera. So yeah, so I just Googled what's the best film school in America, and I saw that it was USC, and so I applied there, and then I got in, and I was like, I had never heard of it before, but before I Googled it, and it was a dream to come to LA. I think also just being like in New Jersey and in New York for like my whole entire life, to then like make that journey, that, you know, American mythologic journey west to California. And at first, I felt like at USC, I was trying so desperately to do things that would please my professors. And a lot of the teachers at USC, and probably at most film schools everywhere in the world, are men, and cis men, white men. And I think for a long time, I was just kind of like losing track of like who I was. And like, it was during that time of when it came my third year, when I was going to write my thesis, which ended up being my short film Ponyboi, that I wanted to include part of my story of growing up with this without testicles, which at the time I didn't know was called, it was an intersex variation. And so through writing Ponyboi, I decided to Google and research more about the variation I was born with, and then discovered the word for the first time, and discovered that there was a community of people. And I just, felt so happy and also just so enraged that after all those doctor's appointments, like hundreds, no one had said that there was a group of people that had similar experiences than I. And no one had at any time offered any psychological or emotional support. And it was just completely like, we're just going to treat, your hormones and your genitals and you'll be fine. And so but it also gave me a fervor to that this movie was so necessary to make. And at the same time, I was like, this whole time at USC, I may or may not have been my whole self. And if this is the last thing that I'm going to do before graduating, like, I'm just going to go, no pun intended, but balls to the walls. And, just kind of like, I'm going to act in it, and I'm going to direct it, and I'm going to write it, and I'm going to do all the things, even though my professors were like, you should just concentrate on one thing. Like, you shouldn't, it's too much, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, no, like, I have to do, like, I just knew that my whole career was like, that I needed to leave this school after paying an insane amount of money, that I needed to leave this school, not just with the degree and the diploma and the name attached to it, but also with a work of art that would represent my entire being as an artist. And that was really important to me. And so the film Ponyboi came to be with the help of one of my closest friends, Sade Clark and Joseph, who helped produce it and helped me co-direct, and Seven Graham, who y'all interviewed as well, produced it, and a friend who became a close friend too, who also went to NYU with me, Kristen Laffey, and we all made this film. And like, it was, it changed the course of my life, because it ended up being the first film to achieve this level of recognition that was written by and starring and created by an out intersex person. And it was just wild to me that had never been done before.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't. It's still weird to like think about that. But it's just a testament to how deep the shame and the stigma is around being intersex, that I'm sure there are intersex actors and filmmakers who are just not out and who have created probably things that we all know of, but they're not out.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Your friend Seven uses the example that there are as many intersex people as there are redheads.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that for some people that just to understand that, it's even like when, for instance, when someone has a role in society, we used to say, oh, the first intersex, or the first trans, or the first gay. And now we've changed the language. Now it's like the first out trans, the first out, obviously gay was a while ago, but, first out intersex person. I remember as a kid working at a country club, and it was apparent that there was someone, a kid that was at the club when it was intersex. And I was like, and no one ever talked about it, right? Like we knew because something took place. And then I've had conversations over the years with people that are good people, that when it comes to binary things, oh, this is, the paperwork, the hassle. It's like, well, but no, these people exist, right? And I think it's important also you mentioned earlier, is that I believe that intersex is an umbrella. There's a lot of different people that may not have the exact same experience that you had. What was it like when you realized that there were other people like yourself? What did that feel like for you, or when you started connecting with people like yourself?
It was just like a quantum leap change for me. Like growing up, and recently last year, I found like my journals from when I was 16, like either post-operation or before, but it was just so harrowing and lonely and sad and like just, suicidal. And like, I think it's the loneliness that really kills, figuratively and not figuratively, intersex people and all people, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes.
That isolation, I think there's going to be a lot of consequences, sidetrack from intersex, from like the pandemic this year. And there's going to be like what has occurred this last year, specifically because of the, isolation and loneliness that people have experienced. We're going to feel the reverberations of this for years to come.
Yeah.
Even so much so, like I was on set yesterday doing a photo shoot where I like just didn't, like, obviously I know how to talk to people and like, but I just didn't know how to absorb everything that was happening. Like I was just so conscious of how I was speaking and where I was in space. And I was just like, this is so weird right now. Yeah. But back to intersex. I should say the definition in case someone's listening. And intersex is an umbrella term for people born with, variations in their body that don't fit the typical definitions of male or female. So it's variations in genitals or in hormones or in chromosomes. And it's essentially just a non-binary sex. It's not really one or the other. But in that there's a spectrum of over 40 different variations of how one can be intersex. And as you say, there isn't one experience to be intersex, but I think we're all ties us together or brings us together is the fact that we've all to some degree experienced shame and stigmatization, specifically by the medical industry, who has positioned the being intersex as something that needs to be hidden and something that needs to be fixed. And for some people, and the complicated thing is that some intersex people do identify as cisgendered or heterosexual. And liked their surgeries and liked the fact that they can fit in, but and don't want to be included as part of the LGBTQIA plus alphabet. But I think that's an inherently transphobic position, because I think inherently being intersex is a queer experience, because in some way you are othered, and to not stand in solidarity with those people that also feel that way too, I think is a disservice to your own experience being intersex, because it's not easy, even if you do identify as cis, and it's still not easy to have your body constantly observed and looked at when you're younger, and not have a clear path on treatment, and how everything is a bit antiquated in how to treat intersex people, that sometimes people are put on hormones and find out later in their life that was not the right hormone, and it's just not enough research has been done by the medical industry of how to treat intersex people. And I think that's due to just wanting to hide the fact that this even is an anomaly that happens, because I say anomaly, but it's not even that much of an anomaly. No. It's 2% of the population are intersex. So it's that's that's millions of people.
And I think also to bring dignity to that too.
Right. They should teach, it should be taught. I remember being in high school biology and learning about genetic diseases or whatever, and knowing that there were certain XXY or X, and but it was not presented as intersex. Right. It was just these freak things that happen, that can happen. But it's it should be presented as people can be male, female, or intersex.
Yeah.
And people can identify, their gender can be male, female, trans, non-binary. These things should be presented, because they're not.
Right.
Because they occur.
Exist.
It's reality. It's what it is.
And you mentioned biology, right? So you think about when we learned we were watching something on television, a movie last night, and the boyfriend leaves the fiance leaves the fiance and goes away, and he's in somewhere in a foreign forest studying a new creature or whatever, and they're documenting it, right? So, and what I mean by that is that as human beings, we're all expression of the divine. We don't question a flower because it looks different or it smells different. And this is a horrible comparison. I'm not trying to, but I'm just trying to. So why is it with people? That we think, we wouldn't do that with anything else. We would force it and say, no, you're going to be like this. Right. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, totally. I mean, flowers are intersex.
Yeah.
Flowers are literally have both sex organs. I forget what it is, the stamen and the whatever.
Well, and actually, it was actually Schitt's Creek, to be honest. We're watching Schitt's Creek last night just for some old feels. And he discovers a mosquito that can mate with itself.
Right.
And it's so it's,
right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it wants to be.
Literally, there's so much variation in nature itself. And I think that's part of the reason why lately I've found such solace in nature, because it feels really also an inherently queer space, in that it is always accepting of all that is and never judging anything, because it just is.
And the closer you get to that, you realize how it all relies on each other.
Yeah.
I was on a farm for a few years, and it was just to lean in close and to see, this thing connects to this thing that connects to this thing, whether it's pollination with the bees, or the way you don't want to plant the same crop in a field one year versus the other year, because there has to be this healthy rotation and balance.
Yeah.
And how we all need each other.
Yeah.
Is what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier about sort of this group of intersex people who identify as cisgender, or
I don't know any, actually.
Okay.
But no, I know of intersex people who identify as cis but still feel part of the LGBT
community.
Community.
So, but what you said,
I don't talk to any of the other ones.
I got you.
No, I just never met any.
Yeah.
There's no wall up.
Yeah, there's no wall up, but
So, but I think what you said was, some of those people were, they're happy with their surgeries, right? There's people out there that are happy with their surgery. But I think the key thing there is that everybody deserves a choice.
Yes.
So, and I know like you and a lot of other, intersex people that we hear their stories, they never had the choice to either have their surgery or not. So, and obviously there's this whole struggle with the medical community, whether it's not talking about this or just saying we can fix this with surgery, that's like their mentality of it. What do you think is a process, or what do we need to be doing to combat this and combat the medical community for approaching intersex people with, saying we can correct or we can fix or whatever their terminology is? What do you think we have to do?
That is a great question. And it is, it has to be addressed on so many levels, not just of, the medical industry, but I guess what I can speak of is like also on a cultural level. And, it just needs to be more visible, and it needs to, how can people have any compassion or empathy towards something that they've never experienced, or they've never heard of? Like, one thing is, I think on the levels, there's levels of visibility, is like for people to know the word and the definition and can, explain it to somebody else.
Right.
Another level is like knowing somebody. Another level is consuming media that has intersex people, whether that's a book, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a film. So I think all those things need to happen because they haven't been happening.
Right.
Because right now, the medical industry has so much strength. And so there was, in 2019, a bill proposed in California to delay intersex surgeries. And there was one, I believe, California senator who essentially was like on the fence about whether he was going to vote yay or nay for the bill. And then the night before the election, received a $50,000 donation to his campaign from like the California, like either pediatric urologists or like, so it's just like,
so it's all
how
about
can
money.
you really fight and this is in progressive California.
Right.
But at the same time, there's also been victories in specific hospitals, one being Lurie's Children's Hospital in
Chicago.
Who have vowed to apologize and also like, kind of relook and put a moratorium on the surgeries right now.
Yeah, and I believe they've also have brought in an intersex doctor, a doctor who is actually intersex as well too. So that just exactly what you're saying is that this understanding of letting the people be involved with the have your own narrative. You talked about narrative earlier. That's just another example as a doctor with that narrative. You know? And I think that I think we honestly have to we haven't said this today. We've said this in other episodes that Anthony and I, because of Ponyboi, we were at you debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then you also, I know you were in numerous film festivals, but specifically Anthony and I got to see Ponyboi at Fusion Outfest here in LA. And we were dreaming of this project and what it was going to be like. And we specifically, because of seeing Ponyboi, we were like, we need to include intersex stories in Talk Out Loud. And so I think I need to be humble to the fact that like I'm not just like woke. It's because I happen to have the luxury of being able, not the luxury, but I had the opportunity to go and have an experience with Ponyboi that then made you familiar and that changed my understanding.
Totally.
And so I think that being able to have like the work you're doing, how important it is for it to be familiar.
Yeah.
To take that fear away, that unknown.
Totally. It's crazy how it's something I've been often struggling, especially as like, the child of first generation immigrants, of thinking like the work of art is secondary to being a doctor or a lawyer or all these other things. But at the same time, though, it's art that pushes culture forward. Yeah. It's art that changes people's hearts and minds, that then allows empathy and empowerment to occur, for then legislation to catch up and make changes.
Yeah.
Like art and culture film and TV are always 10 or 15 years ahead of where legislation needs to be. And it's because it takes that psychological and emotional change for people to have in order for people to give a shit about other people.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like other like subsects of the community. Like you look at like back in like the early or like mid 90s, like when Ellen came out on her sitcom.
Totally.
And like what that did, the ripple effect that had. I mean, the show got canceled in part because of that, but then it paved way for like shows like Will and Grace and Queer as Folk and The L Word.
And then it wasn't until 2012 that, which was literally 15 years later.
Right. So it's like to your point, but that's why it's so important that art and TV and film, that these characters exist so that the rest of the world can see, because in some respects, I mean, we live in a bubble in some respects, living in, Los Angeles, and, not everybody gets the diverse culture that, we have. But part of that is that where you're going to be able to see those characters are on TV and film. Right. And that's why it's just so important for like the work that you're doing and other artists are doing now to get those characters in front of people's eyes so that there is this familiar vibe, for those characters.
And I would just add one more thing to that is that because of Ponyboi and the work that you're doing and these conversations are becoming more known, the people that are intersex that are in these smaller towns, it becomes easier for them to step out and be themselves. So then someone can have a real life experience. They can, watch Ponyboi. They can see some of the other work that you're doing. And then also then have a real life experience with their neighbor that they didn't know who was possibly intersex, right?
Yeah.
We think we're so advanced, but we've still got like this monkey brain wrapped around a lizard brain for survival that wants to speak first and it wants to say, because, it protected us from like burning ourselves when we were kids. But that instinct, it actually becomes a disservice to ourselves and we run over people in the process. And so if we can, sell those stories, get comfortable, get familiar. Oh, I get excited about these kind of things. So if people want to see Ponyboi, they can access that today.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's online. It's on the Amaletto YouTube channel online. And I think to your point, as hard and challenging as it is to tell intersex stories, even to do interviews like this, it brings up, the conversations of trauma and like whether I want to discuss that today or not. Or at the end of the day, though, there are so many people because of whatever interview I did or seeing Ponyboi that have learned about intersex or learned themselves that they were intersex. I have like two friends that didn't know they were intersex before meeting me and before I became vocal about my identity.
Yeah.
And I'm so humbled that that my journey could then inspire other people to start their journey, and that this is happening, that this revolution is really happening. And, I say revolution and I don't mean that lightly. I feel like this is really the next step in not just the gender revolution or for queer rights, but in human consciousness, really. Yeah. Because I think what intersex people really represent is the truth of not being binary.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, this, as Seven goes on and said, this Adam and Eve complex, it goes much deeper than, because it goes into good versus evil, us and them. Dualism, and it's just exactly. And it's just literally that the next stage of our consciousness is one where we realize that we're all interconnected and realizing that intersex people are like this bridge to that it's not just male and female. There are other variations of being. And
there's something holy about or whatever you choose to use. If that word is stigmatic to somebody, I apologize, but there is something about three when you have, and I'm not saying that intersex is just one thing. We know it's multiple things,
right. But
just for today, I guess, is it that there's three, that taking away that dualistic approach to things, it almost feels like if you've had a blockage somewhere where there's been a block. And I feel like when you add that into the conversation or the equation, things just flow like they're supposed to. I mean, I literally feel it in my bones when I say that. Yeah. And when I've been around especially over the last couple of years, being able to have more experiences with trans and intersex folks, that I'm like, wow, the world is even more special than I ever thought it was, or beautiful. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And the life force that maybe as a culture, as a society for hundreds of years, we've had blockages. And there has been other cultures years past that have had, a seat at the table for intersex people that have celebrated that. So this is not a new thing, because sometimes I think that's the argument. It's like, oh, no, this has just been this way forever. It's just bringing back the dignity and allowing the what life really is to manifest itself.
Totally. Totally. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's, just the product of patriarchal, capitalistic ideals, because there's money in treating intersex people like a medical, quote unquote deformity that needs to be fixed. Right.
And I think that it's worth noting is that when we start to talk about intersex and trans and humans, that you've got one side where they're saying that these people have to have the surgeries for intersex. And then you've got other, like, where you've got kids that we know that if they go on hormone block, they're trans specifically, hear me out here, is that if they go on hormone blockers at a younger age, when they know that less damage can be done and dysphoria can be saved. And as a society, some of the people that have, quote unquote, the power to make the decisions want to have it both ways, right? Like say over here, we're not, but over here, we're going to. And when we start to tell these stories, you get to see, it's like, whoa, what's really going on here with that?
There's a lot of puppet strings.
Well said. Yeah.
And it's pretty insidious, honestly. But I think for me, in some sense, it really, I mean, as you were saying this, I'm like, wow, it just goes so deep that it makes me just feel like the work of film and TV just matter all that much more. Yeah. Because you could explain something to someone, or someone could read a book, but there's something, and I think this is what drew me to, well, first theater, my God, an intersex play would be amazing. I'm actually working with Seven right now to create, to helping develop an intersex opera based on the memoirs of Herculine Barbin, who was this French intersex person from the 1800s, who has this amazing, like, tragic, like, story, but so beautifully written that I'm really excited about. But I bring that up because it takes narrative. It takes going on the journey of a story that really allows people to better absorb and feel it in their heart, as opposed to just being told or reading an article or reading, it really takes that leap of an artistic expression to really, get into someone's soul.
If you look back at some of the most amazing storytellers in the world, they've been spiritual storytellers that, have helped us as a society, go back to empathy and love. There's something with the mind where we're able to just relax is when a story is being told. The desire to judge for some reason is removed.
It's like, it's like yourself gets dissolved a bit, and you could just kind of actually be present with something else and be just, in a different psychic space. And it's something that I talk about a lot, about what inspires my art. And I'm really just interested in those psychic dialogues with my audiences, like where you just kind of like, I don't know, where you can meet your own reality with a reality that you've yet to discover, and they can both have conversations with each other. A third kind of space.
That's interesting. You mentioned nature earlier. What else helps you connect with that, or like especially even with COVID this past year? Has there been practices that have been good for you?
During this past year, I've actually gotten sober and gotten into recovery, and that has been really transformational, in that I think a lot of queer people, and maybe I could just speak for myself, I just had so much trauma from being intersex, and then also from them coming out as intersex and not realizing the effect that had on me. I think in 2019, when y'all first met me, and I, was going to all these festivals and was just like talking my ass off about being intersex in front of all these strangers, in front of the world, and showing my movie around. I think it wasn't until 2020 that I realized, like, oh my God, like, what did I do? Like, like, what was I, like, I, like, definitely, like, backtrack for a second. I was just like, I didn't realize the psychological implications that all of that exposing of myself did to me. And, you know, I was using drugs to combat that.
Yeah.
And I, you know, taking that away was just insane. And I didn't know how deep it all went. And I think I'm learning now, like, to trust people more, to trust in source and in God more. And that, you know, there are so many questions. There's so much to be done. But right now I could just really do the best that I can today. And I think that has so many implications for, you know, me as a filmmaker who's working on, you know, the feature film of Ponyboi, and I want it to get done. I want it to get done so badly, like now. But I just know it's gonna happen in the right time, and it is already happening. And like, I want to get to the root of my trauma and like apologize to my father and like all, you know, just connect with, you know, everything that I ran away from in New Jersey. And I know that I'm on that journey to do that. And it's just, you know, it's one that has to be done in the most loving and gentle way as possible.
Yeah.
And I think for a while, I just had this anxiety of like that time was like running out. And I mean, I still do. I had like, I earlier this week had a little stumble, but I guess being in recovery and just getting in touch with like people like me and forming community and just actively trying to be more in the frequency of love, even though when I really don't fucking want to be, is just been so. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me, honestly.
That's so good. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really great. You know, what you just said is that, you know, you want things done now and you want to be able to, you know, accomplish things. And I know for myself, I'm like a task list like checker. Like, I just love being able to like cross things off a list, you know, and just say like, you know, checking boxes and making things happen. And it's frustrating when you're not able to get those things done. And it's frustrating when you're not able to push through. But I think like, even like with this platform, with this podcast, you know, originally it was going to be something that was going to start in 2019, but because of, you know, a variety set of circumstances, it wasn't able to come until we actually went through the pandemic. And it was something that, you know, Jeff or I never saw happening. So I think with all things, projects, work, business, personal relationships, everything, you know, comes in its due time. So it's just as you were talking through all of that, I was kind of like telling myself, chill out, dude. Like, things are going to happen in their own time. So I do just want to ask you, obviously, as a filmmaker and as an actor, there's, you know, projects that you're going to be working on and, you know, different things that you're going to be doing. Is there a dream role that you'd like to play or like to create for yourself?
Wow. Dream role. Well, I'll say I've always wanted to be in like a period piece. I don't know what period.
But somewhere.
But somewhere. I think it'd be fun to be in a corset. And, I guess I want to play things that just like that are like super raw and like just, I'm really interested in playing characters that are like slightly unhinged or like, you know, disturbed in some kind of way.
Yeah.
But are just really trying their best to get in touch with their higher self. And like, those are the stories that really attract me. And just like, you know, ones of like redemption and like that journey like through the darkness into the light. I will say I always, no matter what role I have, my dream has been to host Saturday Night Live forever. Like if you know, when like those inspirational books that talk about like, oh, think of like whatever thing that gets you excited to like, I'll like sometimes in the bathroom like, but it's fucked up though, because there's a binary line in it. They say, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome River Gallo. But always I'm like, oh, how would I tell them to do that?
Yeah.
But I still say it that way. In the bathroom, I like run, and then I run out, and I do, and then I do like a little hop, and then I pretend to start doing an opening monologue. But that gets me going. And I there's very few things, and talking about control and wanting to get to places, there's like, I don't know how my career is going to go, and I don't, and lately I'm like, you just gotta surrender it all. But I know I'm going to host Saturday Night Live. I'm like, I know that's going to happen. So I'm like, I don't even worry about that. Like, just like, just keep doing your thing, and then that'll happen. Yeah, that'll be quite a treat.
I don't think it gets any better than that.
No, because the thing is, when you host Saturday Night Live, it means the rest of your career has gone so well that like, it doesn't like, you know, it means that you're promoting a movie probably. That's why you're on it. So it's like, a culmination of like a lot. So I'll know, that'll be a great Saturday night.
From getting arrested to smoking weed to
right. Oh my God, right outside.
Outside there, exactly. So you were knocking on the door, but you know that patience and wisdom has come in the meantime. So Oh, wow. River, this has been so wonderful. Just getting to chat with you. We really appreciate you taking some time to just spend some time with us. And
thank you so much.
We will be patiently waiting for you and what's coming in your life. I can't wait to see you in Saturday Night Live.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
A great time.
River's reminder to be the narrator of our own story and to lean into the voice deep inside each one of us is something we can all benefit from. You could find links to Ponyboi, the first ever narrative film about an intersex character, and more of River's work on their profile page on our website at www.talkoutloudlive.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk Out Loud. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, rate us, and share with a friend. You can also follow us on social media at Talk Out Loud Live. To catch up on past episodes and learn more about our past guests, visit our website at www.talkoutloudlive.com. You can also get your official Talk Out Loud gear in our online store and browse our online bookstore curated with our guests' recommended books. Thanks again for listening, and remember, be true, be you, and to talk out loud.